Last week, two groups of Americans sat down and published what they believe. One of them was a socialist organization. The other was a right-wing broadcaster building a third political party. And I read both all the way through, which I'm told is not how you're supposed to do this. I'm told the correct procedure is to read the headline, feel something, and then go be extremely confident about it on the internet. Here's what I found in there. Justice, community, fairness, honesty, decency, sovereignty, working people, freedom, take care of each other, tell the truth, stop the corruption. Not one objectionable item in either document. So, we agree. Both of them, left and right, word for word, we agree. And I don't think we've ever in my lifetime been angrier at each other than we are right now. If the words are the same and the anger's that big, one of these two things is lying to you. And I've got a pretty good idea which one. Now, also last week, this part caught my attention. Two leaders of that same socialist organization sat down separately with two different interviews, not on Fox. One went on a podcast run by the editor of The New Yorker. The other went on the longest-running political show in Los Angeles on the NBC station. Very friendly rooms, no hostile edit, nobody sprung anything on anyone. Both of them got asked to explain something their own organization published in writing on its own website. The first one got asked for a number. She went up. The second one got asked about a man's daughter. She went up, and neither of them knew the other one was doing it. Two people, two rooms, 2,000 miles apart, same week, same move. One person has had a bad day. Two people, two cities, same maneuver inside 7 days. That's a house style. Now, it'd be very easy for me to spend the next hour telling you those two women aren't very bright. It'd be fun. I'd do numbers. I could retire on it. That's not what I found. I found something worse. But hang on. First, this. If common sense has become part of your weekly routine, ChadParkerLaw.com is your home base. Every week, you'll find something new. Whether it's my latest books, the Daily News, the free Common Sense Conservative Manifesto, or everything else we've been building together. And if you've got a question, an idea for an episode, or you think I totally missed the mark, call or text me at 252-CHAD-LAW. Some of the best conversations on this show start with your messages. All right, let's get into today's episode.
When you need common sense, come see Chad Law, the boldest pundit you ever saw. His truth hits hard and the talk is real. Reality rules and that's the appeal. Spreading truth, yeah, that's his cause. Opening eyes, yeah. Who needs applause? When you need common sense, then come see Chad. He lays down the law when the lies get bad. The media may think you're dense, so come where it's real with common sense.
I'm Chad Law, the last gay conservative, America's binary brother, the common sense extremist living in radical reality, broadcasting truth on the only rainbow that matters, the red, white, and blue rainbow. And America, this is Common Sense, the show where we read the fine print so you don't have to, where we bring receipts instead of outrage, where politics is just the starting point for something much bigger. This right here is the shelter for the politically homeless, where reality gets a vote, results matter, truth matters, and common sense matters. So welcome home, America. All right, it's Freedom Friday, which around here means we don't get to just complain. We have to come out of the other side with something you can actually use. But first, those two documents. I wasn't exaggerating. Last week, the Democratic Socialists of America were everywhere, winning primaries, doing national press, and their people kept reaching for the same handful of words. Justice, democracy, working people, healthy communities, fairness, power belonging to ordinary people instead of the ones who've got it now. Same week, Tucker Carlson gets on live stream and lays out 10 things this country's supposed to be. 10, not policies, 10 words. I wrote them down. Fair, sovereign, productive, beautiful, healthy, honest, optimistic, wise, decent, and united. Okay, now show me the other side. Show me the campaign running against that, because I'd genuinely like to meet the candidate. I want the announcement speech. I want the yard sign going up in somebody's front lawn. Sick and dishonest 2026. I want the bumper sticker that says uglier. I want the guy at a podium in Ohio going, folks, this country has become far too decent, and frankly, we are being wise at a level I'm not comfortable with. Nobody's running that. Nobody's ever knocked on your door and said, I'm here to make you less free and take away your community. Can I count on your support in November? So on paper, everybody in this country wants the same 11 things, and we cannot stand each other. We genuinely believe the other half is trying to burn the place down, and both halves are using the word community while they think. Which left me a question I couldn't put down all week. If we agree on this many of the words, what exactly are we disagreeing about? I don't think it's the words. Here's what started me down this road. Over the last couple weeks, I kept watching the same thing happen. Different people, different shows, opposite politics, same thing. Somebody makes an enormous statement. Sounds substantial, sounds certain, rooms like it, and then interviewer does something almost rude in modern television. They ask one more question. Not a hostile question, not a gotcha, usually about 4 words long, some version of, but what does that mean? And every single time, the answer doesn't get smaller. The answer gets bigger. Somebody asked for a number and comes back with democracy. Somebody asked what happens to a man who assaults your daughter, and suddenly hypotheticals are unfair. Somebody gets asked how an enormous national goal would work, and the answer is another adjective. Ask for a floor, and you get a ceiling. I've watched it enough times in 1 month that I stopped calling it a coincidence and started calling it technique. And when I figured out what the technique was actually for, it bothered me because it isn't about hiding bad policy. It's simpler and it's bigger. Here's the whole distinction this whole hour is built on. Feeling understood is not the same thing as becoming informed. They are 2 different products. Same mouth, same sentence, same 3 seconds, and only one of them can be voted on. Political language has gotten frighteningly good at producing the first one, and we keep mistaking that feeling for the second. Now, here's why it works, and this is the part I find fascinating instead of depressing. It works because you and me are helping. The sentence doesn't do all the work. You're standing right there finishing it for them. Somebody says economic justice. You don't ask what that is. You already know. You brought your own. You've been carrying a definition of justice since you were 9 years old. It walked in the room with you, and you handed it over for free. Somebody says America first. First at what? Doesn't matter. You've already got the picture. It's very specific. It's yours. And the guy who said it never had to describe a thing. Somebody says the system is rigged. And you're not asking which system because you're already thinking about the time you got denied for something you'd earned, or the bill that made no sense, or the guy who failed upward past you at work. You've got the evidence. You supplied it. He supplied the sentence. That's not communication. That's a potluck. Which brings me to the first thing I want to name, and we're using it all hour. It's called load-bearing language. You see, a load-bearing word is a word carrying part of an argument nobody actually made. One word can hand you a villain, a victim, a verdict, an explanation for why your life is the way it is. Sometimes, if it's really good, it hands you the solution, too. None of it established, none of it argued, because nobody saw it come in. It's the beam behind the drywall, holding up the whole room, and you've never once looked at it. Now, before you're mad at me, that doesn't automatically make the slogan wrong. Political communication requires compression. Nobody's reading a 47-page white paper on a yard sign. Every movement in American history that accomplished anything did it with short phrases punching above their weight, and some of the best of them were true. Shorthand isn't a crime. The crime shows up when compression gets mistaken for comprehension. And listen, I know this trick. I know it because I got paid very well to do it. Before any of this, I spent years in marketing. And I want to be honest about the job description because it was not informing anyone. The job was producing a feeling fast enough that nobody stopped to check whether they'd learned something. It's called recognition, aspiration, urgency, insecurity, if we're being blunt. I was good at it. I'll tell you the whole story later. There's one campaign of mine that's a perfect specimen, and it makes me look like garbage. But I'm telling you now so you understand I'm not out here with a clipboard grading everyone else. I do this. This show does this. Common sense is load-bearing language. 2 words that make you feel like you already agree with me before I've told you anything. I built a brand on a phrase that does most of my work before I open my mouth, and you're nodding, and I haven't proven a thing. So if you were planning to write in and point that out, beat you to it. Save the text for something smarter. But there are 2 ground rules. 1, we're not debating socialism today. I know some of you just felt cheated. The tape coming up is some of the funniest I've ever put on this show, and it comes almost entirely from one direction. Let it be funny. I'm not softening it, and I'm not apologizing for it because they said it out loud on purpose in friendly rooms with no one laying a trap. But this is not a look how dumb the socialists are episode. That episode exists. There are 11,000 of them out there. You can watch one right now on any platform you like, and you will finish it exactly as smart as you started, which is the business model, by the way. The question I care about is harder. What are those words accomplishing? Because if I only run this test on people I already disagree with, I haven't built a tool, I've built a weapon. And I've handed you a very comfortable hour where the problem is always somebody else. 2, and this one costs me, later we're running the same test on language I'm inclined to like, words I use, a phrase that comes out of my mouth, gets nodded at, and means nothing. Some of it fails. Some of it passes, and that matters just as much, because if the test flunks everyone, then it isn't a test. You know, a test that convicts everybody isn't a test. It's a verdict shopping for a defendant. One more thing, and take this one seriously. We're going to spend time on people who respond to this language. And nobody should walk out of here thinking the point is that those people are stupid. If you're 25, rent's eating half your paycheck, and you don't trust one institution that's supposed to be looking out for you, and someone says the system is stacked against you, that lands. It would have leveled me at 25. Runs the same way from the other direction. If you've watched your town get hollowed out and you got sold out by people who voted for twice, and somebody says they betrayed you and we're taking the country back, that lands too. Neither of those people is stupid. Both are responding to something real, which is exactly why this bothers me. Desperate people don't deserve less substance because they're desperate. They deserve more. So why is this a Freedom Friday? Because self-government means we're the ones deciding. And you can't decide on something you can't describe. Recognizing the words is not understanding the proposition, and emotional agreement is not informed consent. Somewhere along the way, we started agreeing to things by vibe. That's a hell of a way to run a republic. So for the next hour, we're slowing the political language down, slower than it's meant to be listened to. We're taking sentences apart on this desk, and some of them are a lot emptier than they sounded at full speed. The only tool we need to start is 4 words. Not prove you're wrong, not defend your entire ideology, just, what does that mean? What does that mean? And if the answer to a slogan is another slogan, you ask it again. So we're not investigating socialism today, we're investigating sentences. Starting with the one that kicked all this off. 6 words on a friendly podcast that fell apart the second somebody asked the smallest possible follow-up. 6 words. That's the whole thing. August 7th, the New Yorker Radio Hour. The interviewer is David Remnick. He's a Pulitzer winner, ran the Moscow bureau for the Washington Post, and been editing that magazine since 1998. Across from him is Megan Romer, a national co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. 32 minutes long form. Nobody's yelling. There's no chyron underneath her calling her a communist. This is the friendliest room in American media for what she came to say. About 11 minutes in, they got on to money, and she says it. They believe in taxing the hell out of millionaires. Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we touch that sentence, I want to admire it. Genuinely. That's a terrific sentence. Say it out loud. Tax the hell out of millionaires. It's got a beat, sounds muscular, sounds like somebody who's already been in the meeting, already run the numbers, already lost patience with the excuses, and has come out here to tell you how it's gonna be. You could put that on a shirt. That sentence is ready to go. And then Remnick, and I want you to appreciate how brutal this was. Remnick asks her what it means. That's the attack. The editor of The New Yorker on his own podcast hands the national co-chair of the DSA all the room in the world to explain her own sentence. And she says, yeah, again, I don't have like a solid, I'm sorry. She's the co-chair. This is not the intern. This is not somebody they grabbed off a rope vine at a rally. This is the person whose actual job is to know what the organization means when it says things. And Remnick doesn't even let her finish because he's Remnick. So he goes, shouldn't you? You're the co-chair of the DSA. Shouldn't you be more specific than taxing the hell out of something? Which, by the way, is the most polite way anyone has ever asked another human being to know what they're talking about. But hold on, because I'm not doing the cheap version. She does answer, and I want to give it to you straight because it matters later. She says roughly, we have to look at what we need to pay, what tax base that requires, and build from there. That's fine. That's a budget. That's what every business owner in America does in November. That's what my accountant says to me in a much more expensive way. Figure out what you're spending, figure out what covers it, work backwards. But look where it landed. 90 seconds earlier, we had tax the hell out of millionaires, and now we should determine our expenditures and identify appropriate revenue base. Those two sentences did not come from the same building. One's a war cry, the other's a Tuesday finance meeting. And notice which one traveled. Nobody clipped the budgeting answer. Nobody's putting identify on an appropriate revenue base on a tote bag. Okay, I'll take it apart right here on this desk. Tax, real word, only word in there doing anything you could call policy. Somebody's going to owe money. The hell out of, what's that doing? It's not a number, not a rate, not a threshold. The hell out of isn't a quantity. It's a temperature. It tells you how angry we're going to be while we do it. And millionaires is the defendant. That's who's in the chair. So strip the heat off. What's left? We think some wealthy people should pay higher taxes. That's the proposition. And that proposition is about as radical as a minivan. Democrats have run on some version of it since before I was born. That's not a revolution. That's a party platform, and it's been in the platform for 50 years. Every ounce of energy in that sentence came from 3 words that contained zero information at all. 3 words holding up an entire wall. And behind the drywall, there's a proposition your grandmother voted for. Now the noun, because the noun's worse. Millionaire. Sounds like a bracket. Sounds like a category you could look up. There's an office in Washington with a list, right? But millionaire by what? Income, net worth, gross, or taxable? Does the house count? Does the 401k count? Does the tractor count? Because a retired couple in Michigan with a paid-off house and 30 years and a pension can clear 7 figures on paper, and nobody in that kitchen is calling themselves a millionaire. They're calling themselves nervous about the roof in the winter. Somebody pulling $1 million a year in income is on a different planet from that couple. Same word. And I'm being careful here because this is where people get sloppy. That word is not the top 1%. Different categories, and I'm not smashing them together because it'd make my life easier. But for scale, the most recent IRS number put the entry point for the top 1% of income at about $675,000 a year. About 1.5 million tax returns in a country of 330 million people. So the word doesn't tell you if we mean 1.5 million households or 40 million, which is a fairly significant thing to leave out of a tax policy. Millionaire sounds like a bracket, but it's not. It's a mood with a $sign on it. But we're still not at the best part. Remnick doesn't let go. He wants a number, a rate, a threshold, anything with an edge on it. And the answer comes back, it's democracy, right? I had to sit with that one. Democracy is not a tax rate, folks. Democracy is the meeting. It's not the number that comes out of the meeting. If I ask my contractor what the addition is going to cost and he says capitalism, I don't have a bid. I've got a world view. I still don't know if I can afford the deck. There it is. The second thing I want to name, and once you see it, you can't stop. Slogan, recursion. You ask somebody to explain one big loaded word and they hand you a different big loaded word. That's not an answer. That's a transfer. You're now holding a second abstraction while the first one quietly leaves the room. And notice the direction. He asked her to come down to a number. Give me a number. Give me a line. Give me anything I could check. And the answer went up. Hang on to that. Now, by the way, quick, because I refuse to let this become a tax episode, if you want to tax the hell out of them, fine. Stipulated. Tomorrow we do it. Here's where we are. IRS numbers for the year 2023. The top 1% of earners pay about 38% of all federal income tax while earning about 21% of the income. The bottom half of filers pay about 3% of all federal income tax. And I'm not handing you a stat with a piece missing. That's federal income tax, not all tax. It's roughly a quarter of what Americans pay across every level of government. And for a lot of working families, the payroll tax is the one that hurts every 2 weeks. Anybody telling you the rich pay for everything is skipping a page. Anyone telling you they pay for nothing is skipping a different one. But fine, take more. I'll get out of the way. Now we're at the interesting question. What are you going to buy with it? What gets built? What's it cost? And how would we know in a year whether it worked? That's the part where I might agree with you. And the sentence never went there. That wasn't the trip. Here's the part I keep chewing on. Day after that interview posted, she went out and called Remnick a debate bro. She said he was trying to make her look and feel stupid. 32 minutes, a friendly outlet, a forward question about her own sentence. You didn't need a hostile edit. You needed a follow-up. And the correction never came. Not that day, not the next, which is its own kind of answer. Fast forward 2 days later, on the other side of the country, different woman. And these are separate people. I'm not blurring them. This is Frances Gill, National Political Committee of the DSA on NBC4 in Los Angeles on News Conference, the name of the show, which has been on air since 1966. The anchor is Conan Nolan on Sunday morning. They get to public safety, and she says what they want is a horizon where people aren't relying on armed enforcement. Nolan reads their website back to her. Defund the police, that's the goal, correct? Getting rid of prisons and jails? She says, yes, yes. And then Nolan does something genuinely masterful, and he does it very quietly. He stops talking about systems. He says, if my daughter is assaulted and raped, is there any agency that would find her assailant and bring him to justice? And she says, of course. Yes, of course. And then he says, okay, what would it be if not police? Where would he be if not jail? And she says, listen to this. She wants to avoid getting caught in these hypotheticals and moves to what she calls the reality. The city spends enormous money on policing instead of streetlights, substance abuse treatment, and mental health care. These hypotheticals. Sir, ma'am, whatever you are, that's not a hypothetical. That's a Tuesday. That happens in that city every single day, and everyone in that studio knew it. The only hypothetical in that sentence is your system. Okay. I'm making fun of her. But watch what the language just did, because something happened in about 9 seconds that almost nobody caught. Before he asked, the conversation was living up in the clouds. Abolition, carceral systems, root causes, harm, community. Every one of those is a category. You can hold a category all day. Categories don't bleed. Then Nolan puts 3 nouns on the table: a daughter, a rape, a man who did it. And the abstraction hits the ground and shatters, because you cannot answer a question about somebody's daughter with the word carceral. There's no version of your daughter's assailant will be addressed at the level of systemic root causes that a human being can say to another human's face. Of course is a promise. Of course means don't worry, the floor is still there. She said it twice before she knew what she was saying it to. Then he asked which agency, and there's nothing. Not because she's lying, and not because she's stupid. She's neither. But because the sentence needed a noun, her own platform abolished. She said yes to a police function in a world with no police, and then yes got her out about 4 seconds ahead of her brain. The words arrived before the meaning did. And I'll be fair about her second half because it's a real argument. She's arguing prevention, fix the causes, fewer crimes. That could be a legitimate position held by serious people with actual research. That wasn't her. She was quoting a slogan. But it is also not an answer to, and when it happens anyways. Because it always happens anyways. Every prevention system in human history has a leftover. That's why we have a fire department and smoke detectors. Nobody ever stood up and said, we've installed excellent smoke detectors, so we sold the trucks. And Nolan didn't invent any of it. He read their own material. The DSA's published platform says in its own words that the goal is to abolish the carceral forces of the state, prisons, and police themselves and their manifestations throughout society. Their paper. He just asked what it does on a Tuesday night in LA. One more, and this one's been rattling around in my head all week. There's a clip going around of DSA members talking amongst themselves about their platform being a requirement now for their candidates. One of them gets to the question of what you'd have instead of a president. She says something like, the head honcho in charge of whatever. The cheap joke is, the socialists have a boss too. That's 4 seconds of material. The interesting thing is the asymmetry. Look at the vocabulary these folks have for tearing something down. It's precise. Carceral, abolition, root causes, hierarchy, systemic, extraction. Those are specialized words. Somebody built those. There's a reading list behind them. Then you ask what goes in the whole, and the vocabulary is head honcho in charge of whatever. The demolition language is a graduate seminar. The construction language is a guy pointing at a wall going, yeah, put something there. I've hired that contractor, and let me tell you, it did not go well. It's not a gotcha, it's a tell. 100 words for what's wrong, whatever for what's next. So here's what I'll hand you before we go on. Not the whole toolkit, that's later. One move. the Slogan Strip. Take any political sentence, theirs, mine, anybody's. 2 questions. What did that make me feel? What did that teach me? 2 columns. Most of the time, the first column is packed. Certainty, anger, recognition, somebody finally saying it. Then you look at column 2 and there's probably a smudge. Now here's what I'm not saying, and I want it on the record. I'm not telling you Megan Romer lied. I'm not telling you Francis Gill set out to deceive anyone. I don't know what's in their heads, and neither do you, and neither does anyone who spent this week on the internet pretending otherwise. You can't audit a heart. We can audit a sentence, and that's what we're doing. And here's the part that turned this from a funny clip show into an actual episode for me. Those sentences worked. Tax the hell out of millionaires, produced certainty, a villain, and a fight, and crossed the country in a day. Of course, produced reassurance. The whole vocabulary produced moral clarity and a team to be on. They generated an enormous amount. They just didn't generate any information. Normally, when something produces almost none of the stated product, we call that a failure. Unless information was never the product. So what's the job? Here's the wall I've been staring at all week. 10 words, nothing attached. Justice, oppression, community, billionaires, working people, democracy, harm, equity, the system, power. Nobody's made an argument. Nobody's proposed a bill. That's a list. Now notice what already happened in your head while I read it. You already know who's suffering. You know who's got the power. You know who's the problem, who deserves sympathy, who deserves a second look. You probably already know how it ends. 10 words and you've got a whole movie. A victim, an oppressor, an injustice, a system that allowed it, a movement that finally sees it, and a promise somebody's going to put it right. Beginning, middle, end. Characters, motive, resolution, and not one verifiable claim inside. Now hear this part because it's where people run off the rails. None of those words are fake. There are victims. There are people with enormous power who use it badly. There are systems in this country that grind people up and hand them a form to fill out about it. The only question is whether anyone has actually shown you that this particular situation is that story, or whether you recognize the vocabulary and supplied the story yourself for free out of your own life in about a second and a half. Okay, the one that makes me look terrible. Years ago, back in marketing, I worked on an anti-aging cream for hands and neck. And the campaign, which I'm honestly kind of proud of, the way you're proud of a bank job you've got away with, was 1 question and 2 photographs. Do you have a face like Kim Kardashian and a neck and hands like Chris? That's it. That's the campaign. Run the slogan strip on my own work. What did that teach you about the product? Nothing. Not an ingredient, not a concentration, not a mechanism, not a study, not a dermatologist, nothing about how skin actually ages. Which, full disclosure, I could not have explained then, and I'm not sure I could now. There's no claim in that sentence. You can't fact check it. There's nothing in there to fact check. What did it make you feel? Oh, you felt something about a quarter of a second, and you looked down at your hands. I didn't sell anyone a moisturizer. I put a woman in front of a mirror and got her to look at her own hands, and it moved. Product flew out the door over 1 million units. But by every standard we'd normally use, did it inform? Did it explain? Did it teach? That campaign was a catastrophe. It communicated nothing. And it worked perfectly. A sentence that leaves you knowing nothing didn't fail. That's what they were paying me for. That's the trade. Nobody in advertising sells the object first. You sell the person somebody wants to be, or the problem they're afraid they've already got, or the room they'd like to be standing in. The object shows up later, if at all. And I'd been out of that business a while before I sat down this week, watched a bunch of political interviews back to back, and got a genuinely unpleasant feeling in my stomach. Because a political sentence runs the same play. It says, I see what's happening to you long before it says, here's what I'm going to do about it. And the first half is so much easier to write. I could write you the first half all day. The second half is where you have to actually know something. A jar of hand cream and a political movement aren't the same thing. One costs you $49 and one runs your country. But the machinery in the sentence is the same machinery. I recognize the tooling. I owned a set for years. And once you see it, you notice even the labels do it. Take democratic socialism. And I'm not doing the tired thing where I tell you these people aren't really socialists. Nobody cares. Here's what's interesting. Go read what's actually said under that banner, and you find several traditions that don't run on the same logic. Worker ownership of the means of production, prison and police abolition, which comes out of an entirely separate body of thought, and ordinary redistribution, healthcare, housing, childcare, which is Western Europe and has nothing to do with Marx. Different rooms, some of them barely speak to each other. And none of it's hidden. They publish all of it. There's the friendly version leading with healthcare and housing and a shorter work week. And there's the full political platform, a considerably more structural document sitting right there on the same website. Brochure and contract, both on the table. But you can join on the brochure. That's what a label does. It bundles. It makes a stack of separate propositions feel like one warm idea you can say yes to in a single breath. Now, I need to slow all the way down because we're about to talk about actual people and I'm not going to be flip about it. You're 25. You did what everybody told you to do. Maybe college, maybe not. Either way, you're working. Rent's eating better than half of what you make. Buying a house isn't a plan. It's a bit you do at parties. Health insurance costs what a car payment used to, and you've watched institutions in this country move heaven and earth to make powerful people whole quickly with your money, and then explain to you very patiently why nothing can be done about your situation. You're not stupid. You can see people considerably richer than you operating under a different set of rules because they are, and everybody knows it, and everyone says it in a room where it would cost them anything. And you've quietly concluded that whatever you decide to do on any given Tuesday doesn't change where you end up. Then somebody says, the system is stacked against you. Of course that lands, and some of it may be true. I'm not going to sit here in a suit and tell a 25-year-old their read on their own life is delusion. Half the time their read is sharper than mine. Harvard's been polling young Americans for years. Last fall, 13% said the country was headed in the right direction. 13. But the finding that stopped me wasn't about optimism. The biggest shift in young Americans since 2018 isn't anger and it isn't ideology. It's the loss of the belief that what they do changes what happens next. That's not cynicism. That's worse. Cynicism still assumes you're a player. And somebody who no longer believes their choices matter isn't shopping for a policy. They're shopping for an explanation. Why isn't it working? Why did it work for my parents? Why does that guy have 3 houses? And a slogan is an explanation. Shaped object, a problem, a villain, a system, and a fix, all of it right there in 9 words from across the room. It looks exactly like an answer. So why does that satisfy anyone? Why isn't everyone saying, wait, you didn't show your work? Because being understood turns out to be one of the most powerful things that can happen to a person. And that's not my opinion. People have studied this, and the results are wilder than I could have ever expected. The basic findings, what you'd guess. Being understood is processed as a reward. Not being understood registers as something closer to pain. Fine, everybody's lived that. Here's the one I can't stop thinking about. There's a well-known survey of defendants in Chicago traffic court. And in traffic court, cases get dismissed all the time. Officers don't show up. Judges figure you already lost a day's pay getting there, dismisses the case, you owe nothing. In fact, you won. And a meaningful number of those people walked out of the courthouse very unhappy. You won! They threw it out! You got your money and your afternoon. Go get a sandwich! And what they said essentially was, yeah, but nobody let me talk. 50-year-old finding, by the way, not a hot take. Feeling heard can beat winning. And the flip side is the one that worries me. There's research on what happens when people get a voice and then nothing changes. You'd think worst case, no harm done, back to where they started. That's not what the research found. People can come out of it angrier than the ones who were never asked at all. Being invited to speak sets an expectation. When the expectation doesn't get paid, you don't come back to neutral, you go past it the wrong way. They named this decades ago, watching companies build big listening programs and then not act on them. So put that against a political movement. You get very, very good at making people feel seen, heard. Finally, somebody said it. And then the rent doesn't move. Now, I'm not telling you anyone drew this on a whiteboard. I don't know, and neither do you. But I can tell you what the machinery does regardless of who's running it. That person doesn't go back to where you found them. They come out more frustrated, more certain the whole thing's rigged, and more hungry for somebody who understands. Which makes them a better customer for the next guy with the same formula. The formula can manufacture the exact resentment it feeds on. That's not a cycle. That's a business model with repeat customers, and the product gets more effective as the customer gets more desperate. That's where I stopped finding this funny. Because if you walked up to someone scared and said, I understand why your life isn't working, and they believed you, you took on an obligation. You now owe that person an actual second half of the sentence. Their hardship cannot become your political capital. Otherwise, you didn't fix anyone's helplessness. You gave their helplessness a vocabulary and a place to sit on Thursday nights. So the question I'd put into any movement, mine included, are you offering people a solution or a vocabulary for their anger? And I'm not answering that universally because sometimes it's a solution. Sometimes the grievance is real, the policy is serious, and the slogan is just the doorway into 40 pages somebody actually did. That's what good politics looks like. The question is only ever whether something's actually underneath. Now here's the number that reframed this whole thing. Surveys keep finding a strong majority of Americans under 30, north of 60%, say they have a favorable view of the word socialism. Big number. Gets a lot of headlines on my side of the aisle. Then you put it as a choice. A candidate who wants capitalism with guardrails or one who wants to move towards socialism, and young men take the guardrails by about 12 points. Both true because they're not asking about the same object. One question is about a word, the other is about a program. And the kicker? Favorability towards the word runs highest among people with a bachelor's degree or higher, around 59% versus 40-ish with people without a formal education in college. So whatever's happening here is not happening to the uneducated. It's working best on the people who were told were hardest to fool, which is exactly what this hour's about. A word can become powerful precisely because everyone's allowed to fill it with something different. Think about that. All right. Now the part I've been dreading since Tuesday. Everything so far came from one direction. And I know some of you have been having a wonderful time. You can hear it, see the text coming in. So let me pick up the same tool and point it somewhere it's going to hurt. Tucker's 10. Fair, sovereign, productive, beautiful, healthy, honest, optimistic, wise, decent, united. Well, shit. I want that country. I'd move there tomorrow. Sign me up for at least 7 of those before I've heard another word. And that reaction, that thing that just happened in my chest, that's the finding. I didn't evaluate anything. I recognized something my body said yes. So run the strip. My tool, my turn. What did that list make me feel? Enormous. Somebody finally said it. 10 out of 10. What did it teach me about how any of it works? We're going to need a smaller number. And that's not a shot at him. He'd tell you himself. It wasn't a governing document. He said these were goals for whatever comes next. Fine. But that's not my point. 10 words nobody disagrees with isn't a platform. It's 10 consecutive compliments to the person watching. You nod 10 times, and by the 10th, you feel like you've joined something, and nobody has proposed a single thing you couldn't object to because nothing was proposed. The nodding, yeah, Tucker, is the product. Now, I'm going to be precise because someone's going to clip this and lie about it. I'm not telling you Tucker Carlson and the Democratic Socialists of America want the same things. They don't. Their politics aren't interchangeable. Their moral premises are different. And if you enacted the two programs, you'd get 2 wildly different countries. I'm comparing the machinery. Same tooling with different nouns. One side, oppression, justice, billionaires, community, the system. Other side, elites, betrayal, sovereignty, establishment, freedom. Same sentence underneath. You're the one getting screwed. They're the ones doing it. We see you. Come with us and we'll put it right. That's not both sidesism, and I'm not scoring a tie. The test doesn't check the party. It checks what's in the sentence. A slogan doesn't get a discount for being the one you like. Stop giving them one. So that's the answer to the question we ended on. The job isn't to inform you. The job is to hand you a character, an enemy, a story, and a part to play in it. And that's why it's so hard to shake. Once you've recognized yourself in the story, somebody questioning the slogan doesn't feel like they're questioning a sentence. It feels like they're questioning you. That's why what does that mean makes people so angry. That's why she called him a debate bro. It didn't land as a request for a number. It landed as an accusation. Which leaves one problem. This whole thing runs on recognition, and recognition is instant. By the time you notice the feeling, you've already agreed. So how in the hell do you catch it before that happens? And you don't need a political science degree for this. You don't need Marx or Hayek or Burke or whoever the internet's pretending to have finished this week. 4 questions, that's it. You can run them in 8 seconds standing in your kitchen with the TV on. Noun, direction, price, strip. Let me walk you through the house. Check 1. Noun. Who actually does it? Political language is in love with nouns that sound specific and identify nobody. Community, government, the people, the system, institutions, elites. Somebody says communities will decide. Which community? Mine? Who speaks for it? Is there a vote, a board, a judge, a mayor, a federal agency? Or is it my neighbor Gary with a clipboard and a lot of opinions about my fence? Because I know Gary, and I want to be very clear that I do not consent to Gary. Then the real one, the one that separates a sentence from a government. What happens to the person who says no? Everything in government eventually needs a human being attached to it. Somebody signs it, somebody shows up at the door, somebody denies the permit, somebody writes the check, and somebody else doesn't get one. If a sentence describes an action and can't name who performs it, the noun's doing more work than the institution behind it, because there may not be an institution behind it yet. That's usually the case. Check number 2, direction. If you only keep one of these, keep this one. Ask what it means. Watch which way the answer moves. Down is a number, a person, a date, a mechanism, a consequence you could explain to a 12-year-old. Up is justice, democracy, freedom, community, dignity, and another slogan in a different hat. We watched it happen twice. Asked how much, got democracy. Asked which agency, got a decline to do hypotheticals. Both times the question reached down and the answer went up. Going up doesn't prove anybody's lying. It means one thing. You still haven't been told. Here's the version I find genuinely beautiful, though. A good answer descends and keeps descending, and it goes further down than you asked. Somebody who knows their subject starts with the shorthand. Everyone starts with the shorthand and then goes, here's what I mean. Here's the number. Here's who administers it. Here's the exception. Here's the part I'm not sure about. Here's the thing about my own idea that keeps me up at night. Substance descends down. You can feel it in the room. They either come down the stairs with you or float up to the ceiling. Check 3, price. What does it cost and who eats it? Not just dollars. Time, freedom, paperwork, risk, enforcement, somebody's job, somebody's land, and the thing that you can't have now because the money went there. Every real political choice has a trade-off. There has never been a proposal in the history of this republic where everybody wins, nothing's lost, and the only people inconvenienced were bad. So if somebody's genuinely worked a problem, they've hit the furniture in the dark before. And here's what sounds backwards but isn't. When somebody tells you there's a part of my own proposal that worries me, that's not weakness. That's evidence. They went far enough into their own idea to find the ugly part. They don't have to have it solved. They just have to have it met. Whereas every proposal is flawless when the cost's been assigned to a fictional billionaire, an imaginary bureaucrat, the market, or some future Congress with unlimited money that never has to run for re-election. I love that Congress. Great body. Never met them, though. Can't name the downside? Maybe because nobody went looking. Check number 4, strip. You've got this one. Pull the loaded word out and see what's still standing. Sometimes there's a clean, sharp proposition sitting right there and you go, oh, okay, that's a real idea. The slogan was the doorway. Great. Compression working exactly as designed. And sometimes you pull the word out and the whole sentence goes with it because it was packing material, nothing in the box. Same verdict. You haven't been told yet. All right. Before I point this at anyone else, I'm pointing it at myself. Otherwise, I've handed you a very sophisticated way to be annoyed at people you already disagree with, and you didn't need me for that. When elections come up, and they come up constantly around me, there's a thing I love to say. I say it a lot. I've said it on this show. We have to make sure this is too big to rig. And people always go, yeah, every time. Nods all around the table. Somebody repeats it back to me later like I handed them something. And I want to be clear because I know exactly how this gets clipped. I'm not litigating any election, not arguing about fraud, not relitigating anything. The phrase is the specimen, not the election. So focus on my sentence. The noun. Who's rigging? Who's making it big? What's the it? Turnout margins. There's no subject and no object. It's a verb sandwich. Direction. Somebody asks what it means and I go up every time. Integrity, participation, confidence in the system. Big, warm words, not one number, and not one of them tells anyone what to do on a Tuesday in November. Price. What does it cost? Who pays? Nothing. Nobody. It asks nothing of me and it requires nothing of you, which is a hell of a design feature for a sentence that sounds like a call to action. Strip. Take out rig which is doing all the emotional labor, and take the rhyme because the rhyme's doing at least a third of the work. And I know that because rhyming is a technique and I've been paid for it a lot. What's left? Basically, vote a lot. 4 checks, 0 for 4. I wrote a bumper sticker that means vote a lot. I dressed it up in a rhyme and grown adults nod at me. And I'll say it again next week. That's how good these are. I write this crap professionally. I've spent the last hour taking other people's sentences apart on this desk, and mine still gets out of the house before I've inspected it. Nobody's above this, least of all the guy with the show about it, me. All right, Tucker's 10, and I'm doing this honestly, which means some pass. And when they pass, I'm going to say so and not spend 40 seconds finding a way to take it back. Fair. He doesn't leave it at fair. He goes down. He means the same rules applying to presidents, to federal agents, to the connected, and he uses the Epstein situation as his example of what it looked like when they don't. That descends. That's a proposition. Equal application of law, regardless of who you are. You can argue with it. You can ask him how and who enforces it and what it costs. But he told you what he meant. Give him the point. United. Same thing, faster. He says the first way you get there is stop mass migration. That's a big claim with enormous consequences, and you may violently disagree with it. Doesn't matter. That's not what we're testing. He was asked what united means, and he answered with a concrete policy direction in 4 seconds. That descends too. Whether he's right is a different conversation, and it's one you can actually have now because he gave you something with edges. He handed me something I could argue with. That's genuinely a gift. Most of what I get handed all week, I can't even find a handle. Beautiful. Okay, now, he talks graffiti, public drug use, violent crime, so there's something that's not nothing. But beautiful's doing a lot of lifting after that. Beautiful what? Architecture, public space, zoning, federal buildings, billboards, roads? And who decides? Because my definition of a beautiful America and yours are not the same document. Somewhere in this country, there's a man who sincerely believes the most beautiful thing ever built by human hands is a Buc-ee's that married a Bass Pro Shop and had a baby at an interstate exit. And he votes. And his vote counts exactly as much as mine, which is either the glory of this republic or a problem, depending on what time of day you ask me. Run down on beautiful? Who's got the authority to make an American city beautiful? And what happens to the guy who builds something they've decided is ugly? There's a hell of an answer waiting behind that, and the adjective doesn't get you near it. Beautiful stays an adjective. Not told yet. Wise. And here I'll be straight with you because I could easily invent something for him, and I'm not going to. From what he actually said, wise gets named and gets very little underneath it. There's a version where I hopefully fill in what I assume he means, and if I do that, I've done the exact thing this episode is about. I'd be supplying the meaning and then giving him credit for it. So I don't know what wise means in that list. Maybe he'll tell us. He talks for a living. There is time. Right now, it's a word, not a plank. Now watch what just happened, because it's the most important 30 seconds of the hour for me. 2 passed, 2 didn't. And if all 10 had failed, throw this whole tool in the garbage. Seriously. Because a test that convicts everybody isn't a test. It's a verdict shopping for a defendant. Same in the other direction. If somebody down from the DSA sits down and gives me the actor, the mechanism, the trade-off, and leaves a proposition standing after you strip the loaded words, that passes. I don't have to like the conclusion. The inspection doesn't check your party registration, and it certainly doesn't check mine. A tool's only worth having if it can surprise the person holding it. Which brings me to the verdict, and I've been sitting on this one all hour. A slogan isn't necessarily wrong. It may just be incomplete. Failing this doesn't prove somebody's stupid or lying or that the ideology's false. We can't audit a heart. It proves exactly one thing. You haven't been told yet. And notice how much lighter that is than what we usually do. You don't have to oppose the person. You don't need a counter argument. You don't have to win anything or go find a statistic. You don't even have to disagree. You're not there yet because you don't have enough to disagree with. All you have got to say is, okay, tell me more. What does that mean? Try it sometime. It's disarming as hell, and nobody's braced for it. Now the assignment. This is the part that costs you something. Run it on a slogan you agree with. Anyone can do this for the other team. A progressive hears America first and instantly produces a list of everything that phrase refuses to explain. A conservative hears economic justice and demands a definition before the sentence is finished. Congratulations! You've both mastered the ancient art of being annoyed by strangers. That skill was already at capacity in this country. We're full. The expensive version is when your own body is already nodding. Somebody says America first, and you think, yep, stop. Noun, direction, price, strip it down. Somebody says tax the rich, and you think, finally, stop. Noun, direction, price, strip it down. Defend democracy, drain the swamp, protect working families, restore freedom, take our country back, common sense. Yeah, that one too. I told you at the top, I wasn't standing outside of this. Whatever gets your automatic yes, that's the sentence that needs its inspecting. Not the one that made you mad, the one that made you comfortable. Cheap to say about your enemies, expensive to say about your team, which is why it's worth something. And look, I'm not asking you to walk around suspicious of everything. That's not freedom either. That's a miserable way to live, and cynics don't build anything. I'm not trying to eliminate slogans. You can't. Human beings compress. Politics compresses, marketing compresses, marriage compresses. The goal is knowing the difference between reading the headline and reading the story, and being honest with yourself about which one you actually did before you went and told everyone your opinion. 4 checks: noun, direction, price, strip, and one question underneath all of them. The same question a magazine editor asked a co-chair on a friendly podcast last Friday, and it blew up her entire week with it. What does that mean? And here's the thing I'd leave you with, because it took me all week and I had it wrong going in. I thought the hard sentences to inspect were the ones that make you mad. They're not. Those are easy. When somebody makes you mad, you've already got the knives out. You're hunting for the flaw before they've finished talking. The hard one is the other one. It's the sentence that makes you nod before the person has ever even finished saying it. And here's what gets me about all of this. You're carrying around right now in your pocket more political information than any human being who has ever lived on this planet. Every hearing, every platform, every speech, unedited in full. Interviews that run 3 hours. Politicians talking straight to you with no editor in between. Podcasts, cable, X, TikTok, YouTube, Substack, 400 newsletters you didn't sign up for. Every document any of these organizations ever published, sitting on a website free, waiting for you. And a person can consume politics from the second they wake up to the second they fall asleep and still not tell you what the people they're voting for intend to do. You see, we've confused exposure to politics with understanding politics. You can know every scandal, every clip, every nickname, every feud, every villain that ran through your phone this week and still have no idea what you just agreed to. That's the Freedom Friday problem, and that's why I wanted to do this one. Because self-government isn't a thing that happens on a Tuesday in November. Self-government was never the vote. The vote is the last 5 seconds of it. Everything that matters happens before that. The noticing, the asking, being willing to sit with something a minute before you decide, and the hardest one, being willing to ask a question of somebody you already like. Now, could we solve this the other way? Sure. Stand up a federal agency. The Department of Slogan Substantiation. 1,200 employees in a building in Arlington, and before anyone says America first on television, they submit a form and wait 11 weeks for a determination. There's an appeals process. There's a backlog. Somebody's got a corner office as deputy administrator for adjectives. That's a much stupider country than the one we've got, and we deserve it. You see, a free society can't put a fact checker behind every sentence. It runs on something harder. Citizens who can check their own agreement, not the other guy's, yours. And I want to come back to the thing that's been sitting on my chest since Tuesday. People deserve to be heard. That's a real human need. It isn't a weakness, and a movement that makes somebody feel like they finally exist has given them something genuine. But, and this is a big but, being heard is not the same as being represented. One is a feeling. The other is a job somebody was hired to do. Representation eventually has to produce things, choices, budgets, laws with numbers in them, trade-offs somebody defends out loud, results you can check a year later. The person who describes your anger perfectly hasn't necessarily figured out what caused it. And a movement that gives you your pain a vocabulary has not automatically earned the right to prescribe the medicine. And sometimes they've done the work. The slogan's a doorway and there's 40 pages behind it. Not usually. And if they have, then one more question won't hurt them. So that's the whole ask. The entire civic charge, 4 words long. Make them finish the sentence. We're fighting for economic justice. What does that mean? We're taking our country back. From who? Towards what? We're taxing the hell out of millionaires. How much? And then what? We're defending democracy. From which institution? From which action? We're restoring American manufacturing. How? Not because any of those are wrong. Some are probably right. But because you deserve the rest of the sentence before somebody gets your consent. That's not a high bar. That is the floor, ladies and gentlemen. And to the person this falls on the hardest, if you're broke or scared or you've been ignored a long time or you're watching a place you love turn into something you don't recognize, if somebody finally saying, I see what's happening to you hits like a glass of water, you're not the person who should get less here. You're the one who should get more. Because if somebody's desperate enough to trust you on the strength of being understood, you took on a bigger obligation, not a smaller one. That trust costs them more than it cost you. Their fear can't just be voter acquisition. Their resentment can't be a renewable resource somebody harvests every 2 years. Their helplessness is not a market segment. And I say that as a guy who spent years writing sentences designed to make people feel something before they knew anything. But here's the difference, and it's the one that keeps me up. A customer can stop buying the moisturizer. A citizen has to live under the policy. Now, before anybody gets comfortable here, if you got to the end of this hour and what you're taking with you is, boy, those socialists needed to hear that, you missed it completely. If you inspected every word Megan Romer said and then quietly put the tool down when Tucker showed up, you missed it. And if you came at this from the other direction, if you can take America First apart in 9 seconds flat, but economic justice sails through customs without so much as a wave, you've missed it too. And that goes for me, especially me. Common sense is load-bearing language. It's the name on the door. Everybody on earth thinks they've got common sense. Nobody has ever once thought, you know what my problem is? Terrible judgment, poor instincts, and I trust the wrong people. Nobody's launching a show called Needlessly Complicated Bullshit with Chad Law. Although the numbers might surprise you. Could be an underserved market. So when I say something on this desk and you feel that immediate yes, exactly, that's when you should be asking with me. What does he mean? Can he descend? Is there a price? Because if the only thing the show accomplishes is replacing somebody else's slogans with mine, I've wasted an hour of your Friday and made the problem slightly worse. So here's where I landed after a week of this. Freedom doesn't require agreement. However, freedom does require understanding, which is a hell of a slogan. I know, I heard it. 9 words, rhythm, sounds profound, feels great coming out. Somebody's already making a graphic in the back. But let's inspect it. Last one, right now, on air. What do I actually mean? I mean this. We're going to disagree in this country. Taxes, immigration, war, policing, capitalism, socialism, Trump, Tucker, AOC, the DSA. A free country basically guarantees disagreement. That's not a malfunction. That's the machine running correctly. If we ever all agree something has gone badly wrong and somebody should check the exits. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't need you to agree with Tucker Carlson. I don't need you to agree with the Democratic Socialists of America. I don't even particularly need you to agree with each other. But before somebody gets your vote, your money, your anger, or your loyalty, we ought to understand enough about what they're proposing to know what we're actually disagreeing about. That's my content under my slogan. That's what's behind the drywall. Go check. And that brings me to this week's Reagan reminder. Reagan is remembered for language. That's the whole legacy. Morning in America, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, the shining city. They called him the great communicator, and they didn't mean it small. January 11th of 1989, his last night in that office, farewell address behind the resolute desk. He brings up the nickname himself. He says, and in all that time, I won a nickname, the great communicator. But I never thought it was my style or the words I used that made a difference. It was the content. The most gifted political speaker of the modern era on his way out the door telling the country it was never the words. Now, I'm not just taking that at face value because it's Reagan. That'd be a hell of a thing to do at the end of this episode. So what does he mean? He's not telling you communication doesn't matter. He'd be the last man alive to argue it. He could make a complicated idea sit down and behave. He's telling you what the sentence is for. Language makes an idea memorable. It makes something complicated understandable. It moves people who were never going to read the white paper. There has to be something being communicated. The words are the vehicle. The content is the cargo. An empty truck still makes the trip. It just doesn't deliver anything, and you don't find out until it shows up. That's what I'd like you to carry out into the weekend, folks. Next time somebody says something political and you feel that hit, that yes, exactly. Finally, somebody said it. Don't suppress it. That reaction isn't a defect. That's you having values. And don't assume they're conning you either, because most of the time they're not. Just wait 1 second before you nod, before you share it, before you go tell somebody at work about it and ask, what does that mean? Then listen to which way it goes. If it gets more specific, a number, a name, an institution, a trade-off they're honest about, keep listening. You may have found somebody worth your time, and there aren't many. And if it gets bigger, fuzzier, angrier, more righteous, more certain, somehow while telling you less, you don't have to fight anyone. You don't have to post. You don't have to win. You can just say, I haven't been told yet, and ask again. Because a slogan can tell you where somebody stands. Substance tells you whether they know what they're standing on. So this weekend, whether it's them or me or the one you've been repeating since you were 19, make them finish the sentence. America, this has been common sense.
It's wonderful. It's marvelous that you should care for me. Yes, you've made my life so glamorous. You can't blame me for feeling amorous. Oh, it's wonderful. It's so